Namaste. Welcome, beautiful souls. It really is a privilege to respond to the decks I recommend to my viewers, Tarot Tag. And I'm going to take this in little chunks because I feel that there is a lot to say here. This tarot tag first came out as an amalgamation of a variety of decks, and then there was a separate one for mass market and another one for indie decks. And instead, I have decided to approach this by topic. And so I will be doing a series of shorter videos looking at each of the questions individually. And so the first decks I recommend topic is inner child work. And I do want to thank the lovely Nova for providing all of these prompts. A deck you recommend for inner child healing, one that feels safe, nurturing, and playful, ideal for reconnecting with innocence, creativity, and emotional truth. And I want to say that a lot of these categories do indeed overlap, that some of the decks that I will be talking about for shadow work will bring up issues of inner child or childhood trauma. And this is not a video to talk about deeper psychological implications here, but I do want to share with you some of my personal experiences in healing childhood trauma in my own inner childhood work. And my story always goes back to the day that my father died, when I was not allowed to grieve alone and have space for my grieving process. And I was literally yanked out of my aloneness back into a large group of people post funeral. And I mean, this is one story of many, and I suppose at 13 years old, losing my father was pivotal in my life. But I'm sure we all have different childhood experiences that changed everything forever. And I think these decks and the choice of this deck is something that we can begin to work with. And one of the things that I always suggest with clients who are trying to figure out why these patterns just keep repeating over and over is to find space for holding the hand of little you and letting little you know that everything is going to be okay, that I've got you, quite literally. I'm holding you by the hand, and now I know, and now I've seen a few things, and we're going to be okay together. This makes me think of the Time Traveler movie. That was one that really affected me deeply. But let's get into these four decks here. On the left is the Solara Occulta Tarot. Far right is the Wisdom of Pooh, and the two decks in the center are both mass market decks. And I'm going to begin with the one on the far right, the Wisdom of Pooh. I was very fortunate as a child to have stories read aloud both at school and at home. And one of those stories that I will always remember were the books by A. Milne and the stories of Winnie the Pooh and his friends, and Robin and Tigger and the whole gang. So this was a really important group of books for me. And I studied them later in university as well, too, in children's literature. And I think these are really important words to work with. The metaphors are so beautiful in these stories. I think the archetypes are absolutely brilliant. We can find lessons and meaning in many of these adventures. Later on, Disney obtained the copyright to these stories for video production, and we had these brilliant shorts that were created and broadcast on old school television, and they brought these stories to life. And it was so magical to see the film. And I know as well too there were old slide reels that were also shared at school as part of the sharing of these stories. And so if you have never picked up one of A. Milne's books, I believe there were four of them, and then you can also get them together in a collection. They're just beautiful. They're just beautiful. And they're so gentle, but they're full of deep and powerful insight. Each of the characters have deep archetypal energy that any of us can work with and will probably come forth and be quite confronting when we are ready. And there's lots of questions that can be asked of these stories. Why was Christopher Robin left alone to venture through the 100-acre wood? Or was this just a reflection of a simpler time where children were left um, to journey on their own and discover what they might? And so, because of my deep connection with these stories, I feel a fondness for these cards. And perhaps what the most significant point here in sharing this deck is that it is a fond connection that I have with these stories that would be a part of a healing journey and connecting with my childhood. And I go back to sitting in front of the television and thinking about the room that the television was in, where my family may have sat, who was present, who was not present. And there just might be something that comes forth with one of these cards or combination of cards. And if you don't know the stories of Winnie the Pooh, these are just such brilliant, brilliant energies. I really do. I'm so glad that I hopped on board with this deck. Yeah. Okay. So this is my first recommendation. Want to go back to something I said earlier, and that was journeying back to a time where your inner child, a younger version of yourself, was in distress, and envisioning holding the hand of that child and walking through that challenging time with them. This particular deck, the Enchanted Tarot, I believe it's now in its 30th anniversary edition. This is the 20th anniversary edition, I believe. It's still available. And this is an incredible deck that personally, when I look at this deck, I think about a book that I had as a child. It was a Hans Christian Andersen poetry book. And it had very similar kinds of paintings in the book. I still have it actually. It's very near and dear to my heart. I still remember some of the poetry. And there's something about the warmth of the textures of the fabric collage that feels cozy and comforting. And within many of these cards, I have found my own stories and my own reflections. And the guidebook that comes with this deck it's very well done. And there may be insight that you don't find on your own. However, I think these are rather easy cards to work with. There's just something about this deck that feels like it wants to take care of me. It wants to help me to heal. And I have used this deck for many, many years. And I can't say enough about its beauty and its charm and the connections that it has to a lot of fairy and folk tales. It's really a beautiful, beautiful offering. The cards are larger, a little more difficult to shuffle, but if you feel connected to them, you'll find a way to shuffle them in some way, even if that includes just washing them on your table, mixing them all up. The next deck that I have in hand is an indie deck. It is rather expensive, and I'm not sure if it's still in print, and this is the Solara Occulto Tarot. And I strongly recommend that you go back to my Tarot Card of the Year readings for 2025. I used this deck, and I had created a special spread for each tarot card of the year, and I was so charmed by this deck. There were incredible connections that came forth. And there's something about these imp like creatures, the nautiluses. I don't know. I feel like this deck could help with so many issues. And it has a magical energy. There are so many mythological creatures that appear in the deck. It feels warm and fuzzy. The colors are kind of neutral, and yet it retains an authenticity to the artwork of Pamela Coleman Smith. The movement is lovely. And if I look at a card such as this one, the Sun card, we do have the little child on the horse and the older, wiser me here in front of my inner child. I feel like this is a deck that can take care of little you, younger you. And at first, it may appear like it's a deck full of weird little creatures, but there's so much care and love here. I just found these connections to be very, very poignant. And so I highly recommend the Solara Occulta for inner child work. For this series, I am selecting 2 mass market and 2 indie decks for each category. And the second mass market deck that I'm recommending for inner child work is the beautiful Chrysalis Tarot. This came out more than 10 years ago. There have been a lot of probably comparable decks that I could recommend, such as maybe Tarot of the Divine. But there's something about this deck that is just incredibly beautiful and powerful, deep and mysterious. And if you look at these cards and you haven't seen this deck before, you can just feel the energy of its wisdom and its layers of connection. And for a deck that is more than 10 years old, it has a great diversity of population and culture. The guidebook by Tony Brooks will certainly help you in understanding some of these paintings, and yet it has a power and wisdom in its intuitive energy as well too. And when I look at the Bella Rosa, I can feel and connect with stories that were important in my childhood. I did not have any Hindu pantheon gods and goddesses when I was a child, and yet I certainly could intuitively read the energy of that card. The colors are beautiful. This moon card probably is my favorite card in the deck. And I think that if you were taking readings with a client to a deeper level, that the perfect card would just appear in your readings. And so this is one, I love this card. So many of the cards I have found unique and inspiring stories. It feels kind of safe. It doesn't want to go too far too fast. In a way, it's a little bit protective of inner child energy. And of course, like many of these decks, the suit names have been changed, and yet in these name changes, there is some wisdom scrolls, of course, is swords. And with the court cards, we still have page, knight, queen, and king, and the all familiar stones for pentacles. I feel like this deck has a way to touch hearts that some other decks may not. It is vulnerable, it is childlike, and yet it's so accessible. Inner child work is not a place I often go with clients because it is very sensitive. And if this is work that you are venturing into with yourself, then I encourage you to go back to a time, go back to a story, a place where everything changed, and begin your journey there, asking, maybe even asking the cards, what was the point in time where everything changed in this lifetime that set me on a new course. And I think that you could really find healing and peace with any of these four decks. The two mass market decks are the Chrysalis Tarot and the Enchanted Tarot. Sorry, I don't have the box here. It comes in a larger box. And the two indie decks I'm suggesting are the Wisdom of Pooh Tarot and the Solara Occulto Tarot. So I hope this helps, and I look forward to your feedback. Take good care, and I'll see you in the next episode. Namaste.